Montreal's bike network is the envy of many cyclists across Canada, but in this city, it's an issue that's much more divisive. In the last 10 years, the bike network has nearly doubled in size. So how did we get here? The first phase of the bike network actually dates back to the 1980s, and that involved mainly focusing on connecting parks together. Not much changed until 2009 with the arrival of Bixi, which is the city's bike sharing program. And at that point, the bike network just exploded. We started seeing the addition of painted lanes on the road, or so-called sharrows.
It was relatively easy to do. You put in some paint on the ground, and it was helping cyclists to have some space.
Despite criticism that the island of Montreal has been overrun with bike paths since Valérie Plante and Projet Montréal came to power, that's not really true. At the end of 2012, the city's bike network actually totaled 630 kilometers. Since then, the biggest jump, if we focus just on kilometers, was during Denis Coderre's tenure as mayor. He added about 220 kilometers. Valérie Plante, she's added about the same amount since 2017. Gros says the difference, though, is safer bike paths. Since 2020, most of the lanes that Projet Montréal has added are protected bike lanes. That's those red lines on the map. In all, Montreal's cycling network now sits at around 1,065 kilometers.
When Gérald Tremblay brought Bixi in, there was many cartoons of him on a bicycle. And there was also many cartoons of Denis Coderre on the bicycles. It seems that cycling is an issue that polarizes and that represents something that some people like to oppose.
The most high-profile example of this is the Saint Denis portion of the Rev, which is right here in the plateau. The goal for the city was to make cyclists feel safer while they're cycling, and it does that by dividing the cyclists from the traffic. It's also easier to maintain year-round, but it hasn't come without criticism.
So, of course, we need to remove a lane or remove a lane of parking, and it's a lot harder to do. It's harder to explain, it's harder to implement.
Although there was outcry from businesses during construction, she says many have now welcomed the changes the bike path has brought to the street.
Every time you bring some changes in people's mind, in people's habits, it's hard.
She says the city has devoted more time and effort to consulting with communities and businesses where bike lanes are planned. But several recent additions, including the bike path on Terrebonne Street and NDG, have been met with resistance.
To some degree, there isn't a winner. Everybody wins scenario. It's oppositional, right? So there's gains and losses. And so the kind of the car crowd, for want of a better term, always felt that bike lanes were deliberately punitive towards them.
Despite the ongoing tension between different users, the city's bike network and its plans for the future have caught the eye of some Toronto cycling advocates. Ontario's premier has threatened to rip out some bike paths in Toronto and is considering legislation that would require municipalities to ask the province for permission before it installs bike lanes.
It's a real paradise compared to Toronto in terms of cycling infrastructure. So we no longer necessarily mention Copenhagen and Amsterdam. We mention Montreal.
Ro believes that one of the advantages that Montreal has over places like Toronto is a really robust cycling culture. And the ratio of men to women cyclists is much closer to 50-50.
We see all types of riders, people going to school, people going to work, people wearing a suit, people doing cycling as a sport.
By the end of 2027, Projet Montréal plans to add an additional 200 kilometers of protected bike lanes.